The last time we got together, the lesson was teaching our boys, and this is the second part of that lesson. And so as we begin, one of the things that we need to instill in our boys, and many of these applications will be true of girls as well, but this series is dealing primarily with sons, is that we need to teach our sons the proper respect for those who are older. Book of Leviticus chapter 19, verse 32, you shall rise up before the gray-headed and honor the aged. And that's not the only place where the Bible says something like that. In the book of Proverbs chapter 16, it will be Proverbs chapter 16 and in verse 31. Here's what the text says. A gray head is a crown of glory. It is found in the way of righteousness. There is another passage as well in the New Testament, 1 Timothy 5. It will be 1 Timothy 5 and verse 1. Do not sharply rebuke an older man, but rather appeal to him as a father, to the younger men as brothers. All these passages emphasize the same thing, proper respect for those who are older. And there would be practical applications of that. A person might say, well, how does that, what's that look like? What would be involved in proper respect for an older man? Well, it would be things like looking them in the eye when you're talking to them. Seems like we have a lot of men today, or young men today, that they've always got their head down. They don't look you in the eye. Looking someone in the eye when you talk to them or when they're talking to you, that's respect. That's honor. It would also include humility. That is being willing to listen, not cutting a person off as they start to say something, and expression of appreciation for the advice they're seeking to give you. One of the things that kind of bothers me sometimes is that an older man will attempt to give some good advice. Maybe a father will attempt to give a son good advice, and the son might go, yeah, I know that. Well, that's not honor. That's not respect. Saying, yeah, or I've already heard that, or I've heard that 100 times before, there's no honor there. And so honor includes patiently listening, really listening to what the person is saying, and also expression appreciation for taking their time. They try to help you. They try to make your life better and easier. Also, respect is shown in different parts of our being. We show it, as we've noted, with our eyes. That is, we don't roll our eyes when someone is talking to us. Well, that's disrespect. We look them in the eye. But it also is shown in body language, whether you sit up straight or you stand straight. It's shown in attitude. And it's shown also with what we say, with our mouth. Honor and respect are shown in all those areas. In the book of Proverbs chapter 30, verses 11 through 13, we have a really good picture of how God feels about a young individual who is not respectful. Here's what it says. There's a kind of man who curses his father and does not bless his mother. There is a kind who is pure in his own eyes, yet is not washed from his filthiness. There is a kind, oh, how lofty are their eyes, and their eyelids are raised in arrogance. And then in verse 17, the eye that mocks a father and scorns a mother, the ravens of the valley will pick it out, and the young eagles will eat it. Well, that makes it pretty clear about how God feels about dishonor, especially a young man dishonoring or who dishonors his parents. Look at that section of Scripture again in Proverbs chapter 30, particularly 11 through 13. The danger is of every new generation, every young generation, is to somehow think that we don't need the advice of other generations, that we've got all the answers, that everybody older than us doesn't understand or is out of touch. And to me, that's kind of the idea of the person who's pure in their own eyes. In their own eyes, they're faultless. And yet the text says they're not washed from their filthiness. They've got a lot of problems. They need a lot of help. And their eyelids and their eyes are lofty, and their eyelids are raised in arrogance. That is, we don't want anybody help. We can do it all by ourselves. We don't want any advice. And everything that we're going to do better. And a generation that has that attitude is in danger. in danger of making huge mistakes. In fact, one of Satan's goals is to disconnect each generation from all the others before it. If Satan can get a generation isolated, or that generation is refusing to listen to anything that was said before, then he has them exactly where he wants them. Because you've just cut yourself off as a generation or a culture from a tremendous amount of wisdom and experience of the past. Basically, you're going into the rest of your life blind and completely unprepared for the temptations that might be around the corner. So, among other things, we need to learn a healthy respect for those that would be viewed as leaders, those would be older. Book of Hebrews chapter 13, verse 17, obey your leaders and submit to them, for they keep watch for your souls. And of course, that's an attitude that members, Christians, are to have towards the shepherds or pastors or elders who tend the flock, who shepherd them. And it's to be an attitude of respect, that these men have lived longer. These men have been through various battles. These men have faced various temptations and challenges. These men know the map. They know the roadmap of life. They know what's going to be around the next corner. And so carefully listen to the advice and guidance they're seeking to give you. They've been there before. What they have to say can really help you. They watch for your soul. They watch for your spiritual welfare. They're trying to protect you. Book of Thessalonians, 1 Thessalonians 5, we have a similar passage. Verse 12, but we request of you, brethren, that you appreciate those who diligently labor among you and have charge over you in the Lord and give you instruction, that you esteem them verily highly in love because of their work. And the work they do is very important. In a similar manner, parents do kind of a work like that. That is, parents give kids instruction. Your father is 30 years ahead of you, and you are 30 years behind him. Well, and he's been on that road before, and he knows where all the potholes are and where the dangerous curves are and things like that. And not to listen to him, just setting yourself up for a huge accident in life and a tremendous failure. Respect also for the older generation includes honoring what we might call long-time family friends. Let me give you this passage. Proverbs 27:10. Do not forsake your own friend or your father's friend. I like that passage. As I noted earlier, the temptation is, when you're young, is to not listen to anyone older. And some don't listen to their parents, and maybe their father might say to a good friend, would you talk to my son? And you don't listen to them either. And the danger is, don't do that. Any friend of the family who's been a friend of the family for a long time should not just be traded in for a new friend. There's been a tremendous amount of loyalty that individual has demonstrated, a tremendous amount of concern and love for your family. You can learn a lot from a friend like that, particularly your father's friend. If your father is a good man, then typically whatever friends he is going to have are men of wisdom and men of honor. And they can teach you a lot. And they're a very valuable asset. And they're someone that you should turn to when you have questions about things and make use of them. Because in one conversation, they can teach you so much. I remember hearing recently about a study of people that had gone off to college. And the question was, would they do it again? And some said no. Some said no, they would not do it again. And I'm not encouraging you to stay away from college. But what they said is, one of them said is, what they learned in 4 years of school, they could have learned in a very short time if they just listened to their grandfather. Grandfather could have taught them all the same things. And so I'm not downplaying college, but what I am I'm elevating the wisdom that a wise older man can give you. Sometimes in 5 or 10 minutes, a wise older man can give you things that otherwise you might spend your entire life learning by trial and error, and in a very unpleasant way. The instruction that they give you is priceless. 1 Kings chapter 12 and verse 8, we have an example of a young man who has a chance to listen to an older generation, and it's Rehoboam, Solomon's son. Solomon dies. You've got Solomon's counselors that are trying to tell the new king what to do. And then you have the new king's contemporaries, his younger friends who want to get in power now. And in verse 8 of 1 Kings it says, "But he forsook the counsel of the elders which they had given him, and consulted with the young men who grew up with him and served him." And the counsel that he opted for was disastrous, and he lost half of his kingdom. So be careful about thinking that your contemporaries have all the right answers. Remember, if you're young, then all your contemporaries are young, and they're just going to be as limited and short-sighted as you are. It's okay to talk to them. It's okay to have friends that your own contemporaries, but don't limit yourself to just your generation. And that includes, and I think I've said this before, is do not read books that are only from your generation. Read books that are from other generations. Don't just watch movies that have come out in the last 5 years. Watch movies that came out 30, 40, 50 years ago. Don't just spend time with people your own age. Spend time with people that are 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years older than you are. And you will become a very well-rounded individual and hopefully a wise individual. Well, as someone said, do not focus on people who are fun, or fun for the moment, but lack substance. The next thing I want to talk about is the importance of stewardship. We've been in the book of Proverbs, and I want to go to another proverb. It's Proverbs 6. And we will be in Proverbs 6, verses 6 through 11. And here's what the text says. "Go to the ant, O sluggard, observe her ways, and be wise, which having no chief, officer, or ruler, prepares her food in the summer, gathers her provision in the harvest. How long will you lie down, O sluggard? When will you arise from sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. And your poverty will come like a vagabond or an armed man, and your need like an armed man." Well, let's take a look at that section of Scripture. Stewardship. Now, I want you to be impressed with the illustration that the Holy Spirit gives us in this verse. The Holy Spirit tells us to observe the ant, the little ant, and you can learn some very valuable lessons. The first thing is ants continue to work and are very diligent even though there's no boss or supervisor. We need to instill in our sons the importance of working when no one is looking. That is, we don't want our sons to be the type of man that only works when the pressure's on, only works under threats, only works when the boss is looking. We want our sons to be the type of worker who works all the time, who works whether the boss is there or not, who works whether they're alone or with a whole bunch of other people, but just works all the time. That is, they don't need a boss. They don't need someone watching over their shoulder. They are self-motivated. That's the type of son that we want to have. And that's the type of young man, if you're a young man watching this, that you should be. And there's a passage like that in the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verse 22, where Christians are told, "Obey those who are your masters on earth, not with external service or eye service, as those who merely please men." You should be self-motivated. Someone shouldn't have to prod you to get out of bed in the morning. Someone shouldn't have to bug you to set your alarm clock. Someone should not have to complain in order for you to clean up your room. You should just see the work that needs to be done and get to it. My room needs to be cleaned up. Part of stewardship also involves, if you borrow something, you borrow someone's car or tool, you return it clean. You return it all cleaned up. You return it in better condition than you borrowed it. If you borrow someone's car, good idea is that you wash it, vacuum out the interior, fill up the gas tank, and give it back to them better than you received it. The same thing is true if you borrow tools or things like that. And there's another application also to your room. We talked about cleaning your room. Now, sometimes young people can kind of think, well, that's my room. Well, it's not your room. You don't pay the mortgage. That room belongs to your mom and dad. It's not your room. It's their room. That's part of mom and dad's house. And stewardship would mean that since I'm living in a room provided by my mom and dad, a room that mom and dad pay for, I'm going to take good care of this room because it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to them. And also we need to remember, now, your mom and dad are going to also try to give you privacy, but remember that's their room. And if they want to come in, they can come in. And if they want to see what you've got in your room, they have a perfect right to it. That's their house. I know sometimes young people are all upset when their mom and dad pops into the room and somehow they think that the room should be off limits and they should be able to watch or listen to or whatever, anything in the room, and that's not true. That's their house. So when your mom and dad comes into your room, don't get upset. What they're looking for is the devil in your room. They know that the devil can get into any room in the house, and so that's what they're going to be looking for, is they're looking for the devil in your room. They have your best interest at heart. And parents, do not allow your kids just to put up any posters they want in the room. Do not allow your kids to have a computer in the room where they can lock the door and be all by themselves with a computer and internet access. That's a bad idea. Or even cable TV in the room. Those type of things that they can easily, one click away, can bring in just a cesspool of filth. Those type of things should always be out in the house somewhere where everyone can see it. That is where you cannot just go off privately and no one's looking. There needs to be some accountability with things like that. So if there's going to be a computer and internet access, that should be like in a living room or a family room where people are walking by and no one is tempted to look at something that they should not look at. And whatever posters or pictures or whatever go up in the kids' room should be things that mom and dad say, I'm okay with that. The reason I'm okay with that is because I could put that up in my own room. That's something that parents sometimes need to impress upon their kids. That is, when we tell our kids that they can't listen to certain music or watch certain programs or go to certain movies, instead of just saying, well, because I said so, we need to say, the reason you can't see that is the same reason I can't see that, because it's wrong, because it's sin. I can't look at it, that means neither can you look at it. There's no double standard here. There's no double standard here. Sin is sin for adults, just like sin is sin for kids. You can't look at it, you can't see that movie, because I can't. That's why. And that's very fair. Before we move away from Proverbs chapter 6, I want you to look at the sluggard in the passage. If we think of the sluggard in Proverbs as someone who just refuses to work, period, we don't have the right attitude towards the sluggard. The sluggard is not a man who just outright, flatly says, I'm not going to work. The sluggard is a man here who says, well, I'm going to get around to it. But what he says also is a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands. He doesn't just outright refuse to work. He convinces himself that he's just going to rest a little bit right now. You know, I'm just going to watch that one TV program. I intend to get to my homework, but I'm just going to watch that one show. I'm just going to play a while on the computer or gaming with the video games. I intend to get around to it. But did you notice what happens in the verse? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and all of a sudden what happens? Well, you don't have anything. You don't own anything. You're poor. Poverty shows up like a bandit and says, stick 'em up. And you know what? There's no arguing with it when that happens. The sluggard eventually loses everything. The sluggard may have inherited a farm in other Proverbs, but eventually he loses it because it's not that he said, I'm not going to work. It's that he deceived himself in thinking that all the little small compromises he made in his life, all the little naps he took, all the hours that he spent on the TV and the computer playing a video game, whatever, guess what? All of that added up into a pretty large block of time. And what seemed like a little compromise at the moment, but you add that little compromise with all the other little compromises he made, and all of a sudden, guess what? Poverty shows up. And he's poor. There's nothing you can, and he's just going to have to accept it. He doesn't have anything. He lost everything. So that's the same way life is. I know you'll hear, maybe if you're a young person listening to that, you'll hear a lot of young person, you'll sit around and while you're all there playing your video games, they'll be, one of these days I'm going to be a... What you realize is that in 20 years, that person still won't have accomplished anything. That's the sluggard, when all you do is talk. And so I want to encourage you, part of stewardship is not only taking wise care of things that your parents have given you, but it also includes taking wise care of your body, 1 Corinthians 6, 19 to 20. You are purchased with a price. You're not your own. Glorify God in your body. Take wise care of your body. Exercise, eat right, that sort of thing. But also Ephesians 5:16 says, make the most of your time. Here's a rule that you need to have. Here's a rule that you need to have for your kids. Work first, fun later. Okay. Homework first, fun later. And instill that in them so that when they go out into the world and they become an adult, that's still the rule. We get the work done first, then we recreate. We get the work done first, then we play. And if you do that, then you'll always have a little bit of money to play with. But if you play first, you're going to just be like the sluggard. The sluggard was someone who wanted to always play first, work first. You do your job first. Finish your responsibilities first. You clean up your home. When you get home from school, get your homework done first. Clean your room first. Do your chores first. Then you always have some time to relax and play a little bit. Let's look at something else here. I want to talk a little bit about diligence, and there's a number of Proverbs here. Proverbs 10 and verse 4, poor is he who works with a negligent hand, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. Chapter 12, verse 24, book of Proverbs, the hand of the diligent will rule, but the slack hand will be put to forced labor. Forced labor. If you're a young man looking at this right now and you don't like doing schoolwork and you don't like doing your homework and you don't want to put the effort into like a trade or going off to college, guess what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life? Forced labor. That's right. Forced. Now, there's nothing wrong with manual labor. There's nothing wrong with working with your hands. I like to work with my hands. But basically that verse is saying, if you don't have some initiative as a young person and go out there and get some skills and educate yourself and work hard now, guess what? you're going to be working the rest of your life probably at a pretty crummy job that doesn't pay much. That's pretty much the equivalent of forced labor. A couple other passages that I want to take a look at here. Chapter 21 and verse 5. The plans of the diligent surely lead to advantage, but everyone who is hasty comes surely to poverty. That's a great lesson for young people. Don't be in a rush. Don't be in a rush to grow up. Don't be in a rush to get out on your own. Don't be in a rush to get rich. Don't be in a rush to have the latest car and have all these fancy possessions. That's always a bad idea. Don't be in a rush. It will come, but allow it to come through consistent work, just a good, gradual, honest progression of work and saving up your money. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 29. Do you see a man skilled in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. Now, he'll be recognized for his talents. Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 10 is another passage. Whatever your hand finds to do, verily do it with all your might. Diligence. We want our sons to be sons who are diligent, hardworking. Well, let's make some applications now in the area of diligence. The one application I want to make is that our sons need to be told that no job is too small or too big. A lot of us, our first jobs were, we might say, not the most important job there was. It might have been, years ago, it might have been picking berries or something like that. Maybe mowing someone's yard. No job is too small. If you put the effort into those little jobs, the word is going to get out that you're a good worker and you will move up the ladder. If you're the type of person that says, well, I'm not going to work hard until I get one of those really good paying jobs, then you're never going to get one of those good paying jobs. Those good paying jobs are earned by people who have proven themselves at a lower level. So the Bible says, he who is faithful in a very little thing is also faithful in much. So we need to teach our sons that if you wash the family car, then I want it done right. I don't want to see big patches on the car that you missed. If you wash the car, then you do it right. If you mow the lawn, then don't leave big clumps of grass all over the place. You do it right. Whatever you do, you wash the dishes, you put them in the dishwasher, whatever, you do it the best way you can. That's the true characteristic of a diligent worker. Someone who not only do they work hard in the big projects, but also they do all the little things right as well. There's something else as far as diligence. As we noted, you want to be the type of individual who works even when the boss is not looking, but also a diligent worker is someone who finds work for themselves. You may have worked with people in the past that, well, we got done what he said to get done, and so they sit around. And so the boss shows up and says, well, why aren't you guys doing something? Well, we got what he said. Bosses love someone that after you do what the boss tells you to do, that you look around and say, no, is there anything else I can do around here? Any garbage need to be taken out? Things need to be swept. Bosses love the person who they don't have to always be on them and say, well, do that next. Where you look around and say, okay, that needs to be done, and so I'm going to tackle that. You find work. You make work. You look around wherever you're at and says, I see things that need to be done. You don't say, well, that's somebody else's job. It's not getting done. Get in there and do it. Ask someone to show you how to do it. Take some initiative. Those are the type of people that bosses love, and often those are the type of people that end up having their own businesses. But diligence means that you look for things to do. The same thing is true that when you live at home. If there's clothes in the dryer, well, and they're dry, take them out, fold them. If there's a load of washing that needs to be washed, then get the machine going. If the dishwasher ended and mom and dad aren't home, open it up and put the dishes away. That's going to go tremendously far as you as a career and also in marriage. Tell you what, if you're the type of person that doesn't work unless someone comes along and pushes you or threatens you or embarrasses you or shames you, if you're the type of person that only does the minimum, only does barely what's expected, don't be surprised if you don't have a very enjoyable marriage. Jesus emphasized the idea of you go the second mile. You just don't wait around for someone to give you instruction. You look for things that need to be done, and you do it. You just don't do the bare minimum. You do all that you can. Now, that's kind of the point of Ecclesiastes 9. Whatever your hand finds to do. Well, how should I do it? Half-heartedly? No. Do it with all your might, because you only live once. So hard work is not to be avoided. If you got a number of friends that don't want to work and try to get out of work, you need to get some new friends. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 12. The sleep of the working man is pleasant, whether he eats little or much. There's one of the rewards of work, is you sleep well at night. There's something else that I want to encourage for young men. Don't allow yourself to get on some weird sleep schedule where you stay up like until 3 o'clock in the morning and you go to bed and you don't get up until 4 or whatever. No, that's a bad idea. You're going to be tired all the time. You're not going to feel good about yourself. You're not going to have good self-esteem. You're not going to get much done. You're not going to have too much initiative. Stay on a reasonable sleep schedule. And parents, don't allow your kids to get on some wacky sleep schedule and stay up all night and text on their phone and things like that. You say, no, here's a reasonable bedtime. Put your phone away. You don't need to be texting. Go to bed. We want you getting them up at this time and putting in a fair day's work. And it's amazing how that can change their attitude and perspective about life. Let's talk a little bit about what we say. Let's talk a little bit about the words that come out of our mouth here. In the book of Ephesians chapter 4, and the reason I'm talking about this is it seems like we live in a culture where there's a lot of dishonoring things said. We live in a very coarse culture, and we live in a culture where there is profanity all over the place. I heard recently about a young man who started kind of a movement on let's stop swearing. Let's live in a world, let's start a world where we don't have swearing anymore. Well, guess what? He's received death threats from people. And that's sad. In the book of Ephesians chapter 4, it says in verse 29, let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification, according to the need of the moment. Unwholesome words would be like profanity, swear words. You find the same thought in Ephesians chapter 5, where it says in verse 4, and there must be no filthiness or coarse jesting, which are not fitting. And then it says in verse 6, let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of things like swearing and profanity, the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. In the book of Matthew chapter 12, verse 36, Jesus said that at the judgment day, men will give account for every idle word. Well, how much more they'll have to give account for every swear word. There should be no profanity in our speech. There's no good reason for it. It doesn't accomplish anything. No, I'm not going to buy the idea that people take you more seriously when you swear. I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all. And I'm not going to buy the idea, well, it gets things done. It gets things done, No, it doesn't do that either. Here's God's wisdom, Colossians 4:6. Let your speech always be with grace, gratefulness, thankfulness, seasoned as it were with salt. If you want to make an impression upon someone, say something smart. Say something spiritual. Say something profound. Say something that makes a person think. And so I want to encourage you parents of, I know at school they may be hearing it, and in the music that their peers listen to, I know there's swearing in that music. In the movies that are out there, I know it's in there too. That's no excuse though. We should have a zero tolerance for profanity among our kids and in our homes. This is a refuge from the world. It is not tolerated here. And dads, you need to set the example here. If you have a hard time controlling your speech, you know, don't be surprised when your sons are picking it up. Set the example. Show them how a man confronts evil, gets his point across without having to resort to dishonor or profanity. So we need to make sure that our sons are not verbally abusing their mom, their siblings, their friends. We need to instruct them in how to treat people with honor and respect when they speak. We need to also, there should be zero tolerance for a young man speaking disrespectfully of women. That needs to be nipped in the bud right now. Any sort of coarse jesting that he has towards women, any sort of dishonoring comments towards women, he needs to be taken aside and given a very stern lecture about the value that God places upon women. And if he keeps up that attitude, he is going to destroy whatever future marriage he has. Women do not appreciate a husband who verbally abuses them, and neither do kids. She may stick with him. Yeah, that wife may stick with him, but his life is certainly not going to be one of happiness and love. And so we need to teach our boys, just because they haven't had a hard day doesn't mean they get to take that out on anybody else. And just because maybe they're unhappy doesn't mean that they have a right to make other people around them unhappy. Maturity. Here's maturity. Here's what it means to be a real man. A real man, even when he has a hard day, comes home and encourages his family. That's a real man. That's a true leader. Then, let me give you another one. Let me give you some passages here about the need to protect their hearts. We live in a world where it seems like the culture around us is always trying to make the hearts of our young men very hard and calloused and full of evil. Proverbs 1:19 and verse 9, it says, "How can a young man keep his way pure? By keeping it according to his word." The text does not say, how can a young man keep his way pure? It doesn't say, you can't. It's impossible. And yet that's, I think, what we hear from various music artists and radio personalities and people in the media and even teachers sometimes is, and unfortunately from too many men, the attitude is, hey, a young man's going to do what he's going to do, and he just has to do that, and there's nothing, and he just has to learn the hard way. And I don't accept that. I don't believe that. I think that's a naive view. Just because you failed, just because you messed up when you were young, just because you didn't listen to instruction when you were young, doesn't mean that your son has to go through the same thing. There's plenty of examples of young men who did not go off into sexual immorality, who did not go off into drugs. To say that all young men are into this or that is an insult to men. It's like we're saying, well, men are so weak, what do we expect? They're so dense, what do we expect? Of course, they're going to get in this, and this, and this, and this. That's how dense they are. That point of view shows no respect for men and the fact that a man is made in God's image as well. This passage says a young man can keep his way pure. Maybe if you don't believe that, you go back and look at Genesis 39 and look at the life of Joseph. Go back to Daniel 1 and look at the life of Daniel. There's a couple of young men that did not give in to the temptations that surrounded them. And we need more young men that have that sort of cut in character. Let me give you another passage here. Book of Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. Watch over your heart with all diligence. From it flow the springs of life. And the lesson of that passage is this. What you allow yourself to think, what you allow yourself to see is going to come out in your life. This idea that a young man can look at pornography, but that's not going to affect him is naive. Whatever you look at does affect you. Whatever you allow yourself to see and think and believe affects you, because who you are and what you do comes from this. Comes from what's stored up here in your mind or in your heart. And that's why you watch what you put into your head. You watch what you allow yourself to see. You watch what you commit to memory, because that's what you're going to become. And if you're putting a whole bunch of garbage into your head, guess what you're going to become? I mean, there are passages that talk about people who are useless. Useless. You put useless stuff in here, and to God, your life is going to be useless. You don't want to be useless. That's just why. Young people, if you feel your parents, well, they're a little bit old-fashioned because they won't go to that movie, I think the reason that your father probably is not going to go to that movie is your father's wise enough to know that I don't want to put anything into my head that I don't want there, because once you put it in, you can't get it out. It's always there somewhere. I don't want to put any image or thought into my head that I don't want there the rest of my life. So before you click on the next thing on the internet, before you go to some movie, ask yourself, what sort of images am I going to see? Because guaranteed, they're going to be in your head the rest of your life. There's no way you can clean this hard drive. It's there. It's somewhere there, and now and then it's going to pop up in your head. So don't put anything in here unless you want it there for the rest of your life. So only watch and listen to things that are upbuilding and encouraging and motivating, and that will build character in yourself. Don't watch things that undermine character and are going to make it harder to be happy, harder to be content, and harder to resist things that are bad for you. All right. Also, 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 22 is another great passage along these lines. There it says, flee from youthful lusts, pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. We need to teach our boys that they have a very useful tool here in resisting temptation. The Bible is written, among other things, to help us resist temptations and to help us to stay away things that can destroy our life. This is a tremendous resource. So is the wisdom of older men. They can tell you some of the same things. They can tell you, hey, when someone comes up to you and says, watch out, okay? They're going to give you some inside tips on how the devil works. And there's certain things, certain red flags. Dating and marriage and work and career and things like that. Keeping our hearts pure involves more than just keeping it free from lust. In Ephesians chapter 4, keeping our hearts pure also involves verse 31. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Keeping our hearts pure also means not allowing your heart to become a place where you store up anger, self-pity, envy, those type of things. Don't allow yourself to become a calloused individual, a hard individual. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 19, it says, "And they, having become calloused, have given themselves over to sensuality for the practice of every kind of impurity with greediness, but you did not learn Christ in this way." The world is going to try to make you hard on the inside, insensitive on the inside, kind of where you don't care on the inside. And we need to really watch our sons to make sure they're not becoming that way. I mean, red flags would be when they say like, "So what? So what?" Or "It's no big deal." Or "Everyone does it." If they kind of have this defiant spirit that starts infecting them, or "I don't care," or "whatever." Whatever is an indication of a calloused, a heart starting to harden itself, where it starts to become insensitive to right and conscience, morals, the feelings of others. We want our boys to be men, and men need to be tough. But we want them also being sensitive. We want them being sensitive to what other people are going through. Book of Romans 12:15, it says, "Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep." We want them to be compassionate and merciful, because many people are going to have to depend upon their mercy. We want them having their minds upon other people and not just themselves. We want them being a compassionate husband. We want them being a compassionate father. We want them being someone who can sympathize with people who are down in their luck and in need. We don't want them being the type of person who just takes advantage of others when they're down. We don't want our sons to become predators. There's too many predators in the world already. We want them being saviors and leaders. We want them being protectors. So we need to do everything we can to instill in them a compassionate heart. The heart of a leader, the type of man who does not sacrifice everything so he can get his way, but a man who sacrifices his privileges at the moment, his rights at the moment, so other people can be protected. The man who exercises self-control in all things and is willing to put himself second if that means that someone else can be greatly helped or encouraged. That's the type of men that we need. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about godly confrontation. Our world is filled with a lot of complainers. People who talk and complain and grumble a lot, but they don't do anything. In the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 10, it says, "Nor grumble as some of them did and were destroyed by the destroyer." There's a lot of men and women out there who spend a lot of their time just grumbling. They grumble about the government, grumble about taxes, they grumble about relatives, they grumble about everything. They grumble about their jobs. Do they ever do anything? No, they just grumble. Grumble and bellyache. That's not good enough. That's the world. That's the world. That's weak. The Bible tells us that we need to do more than just grumble. In fact, the Bible calls upon us to do at times the hard thing. And we need to teach our sons to do hard things. Book of Matthew chapter 18, verse 15. If your brother sins, doesn't say grumble, doesn't say gossip. If your brother sins, go and reprove him in private. If your brother sins, you don't gossip about him. You don't tell everybody else. That's a cowardly thing to do. If your brother sins, you go to him personally. Yeah, I know that's scary, but that's the courageous thing to do. That's the thing that you would want someone to do. They would want you to come to you. You go to them personally. You appeal and exhort and encourage and admonish them to forsake their sin, to make it right. You confront them with love and conviction and discipline. That's the manly thing to do. There are other passages as well. That's not the only passage along those lines. In the book of James chapter 5, verse 19 and 20, my brethren, if any among you strays from the truth, and one brings him back, all it takes is just one. I mean, will you be the one? When you see someone go off the deep end, will you turn a blind eye to that and say, I don't want to get involved? We've got too many people in our world that kind of have this weak attitude of, I don't want to get involved. Will you go? Will you go and reach out to the person who strayed? Will you bring him back? Will you, I know it's uncomfortable and they may not appreciate your help initially. They may say, what are you doing here? They may say, well, you're not perfect yourself. And you might find that you get an earful. I know there's a big cost to those passages. Let me also throw another passage in here, Matthew chapter 5. Verse 23, if you are if you're presenting your offering at the altar, and then remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar and go your way and first be reconciled to your brother, and then come and make your offering. Here's the reverse scenario. If you know that someone has something against you, oh yeah, I know the easy thing, I'm not going to talk to them. I'm not going to return their phone calls. And I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to pretend it's not there. And I'm just going to hope that they go away. I know there's a lot of people in our society that do that. They go inside their house, they shut the door, and they hide. They hide from the rest of the world. And this verse says, God says, I don't want people who hide. If you've done something and you know that's upset somebody and they have something legitimately against you, God says, go make it right. That's a priority. And go make it right now. Our sons need to be the type of men who put a priority on trying to restore relationships. If they are at odds with someone, then they try to make it right. And so a son, we want our sons to be the type of individuals that if him and his wife have a fight, that he's very quick to try to make that right. If him and his kids are at odds, very quick to try to make that right. If he's at odds with his own father and mother, he does everything within his power to restore that relationship. We need far more people out there that are proactive like that and aggressive like that when it comes to restoring relationships, creating unity and harmony, and being a very strong and mature and courageous peacemaker. Will you be someone like that? Will you teach your sons to be like that? Remember your sons are the next generation. This civilization is dependent upon the quality of men that we produce in this country. Thank you. If you would like a copy of this lesson, it's on the internet, www.beavertonchurchofchrist.net. And there are many other lessons there on the family, raising kids, marriage, and other topics. If you have any questions, and if you'd like to contact us personally about anything in this lesson, or if you'd like to set up a home Bible study, a location that you're comfortable with, and a time that you're comfortable with, give me a call at 503-644-9017, and my name is Mark. Thank you.